Picture this. You stuck to the plan the whole day. You worked out, you ate well, then suddenly it's 8 p.m. and you're standing in the kitchen eating things that you swore you wouldn't touch. And the worst part isn't even the food choices. It's the guilt, the why can't I just stay consistent feeling. So you tell yourself you'll be better tomorrow, but then you end up right back in the same situation that night or maybe even days later. But this isn't a willpower deficiency. This is a signal from your body. And today I'm going to show you what your body is trying to tell you and what to do instead.
I wanna heal, I wanna feel like I'm close to something real, somewhere I belong.
Now, if you're new to the show, I'm Gavin Scubolito. I'm a functional health coach for women, and my mission is to help you understand your body better so it can respond better. I've helped hundreds of women transform their body and their health to feel like themselves again, and in this show, I teach you how. Now, night cravings, I think, are one of the most common struggle among a lot of women that I've worked with. And I think there's also this really big stigma, especially, in diet culture, that this is just a self-control issue or it's a willpower issue. But I think it goes a lot deeper than that. And I think that cravings, especially at night, are more of a downstream symptom from something that happened earlier in the day. So my goal in this episode for you is to actually give you a framework so you can stop fighting these cravings and actually start to read the room a little bit better, so to speak. And there's a few reasons for why this can happen. I want to kind of cover the most common ones that I see in practice and then give you some step-by-step frameworks to actually start to catch this, understand where you might fall on this spectrum, and then actually take some steps to start to improve that for yourself. Now, one of the first and most common signals that this is going to typically point to, I would say probably 80 to 90% of the women that I've worked with, typically who are battling cravings, especially at night, and maybe even throughout the day, fall into this one boat. And that boat is the underfueling cycle. Now, what we have to keep in mind is that your body runs on fuel, and that fuel is food. So when your body doesn't get enough during the day, it's going to have to compensate at another time of day. So what this can typically look like is skipping breakfast. Maybe you have a really light lunch. You're trying to eat clean throughout the day. And what this actually causes is blood glucose, instability. So blood sugar. That blood sugar instability and, drops when you're not eating enough, or you're skipping meals. Blood sugar is going to drop, and that leads to certain chemical reactions in the body, certain hormones that kick in that need to bring that back up. Okay, it's kind of like actually a stress response. One of those hormones is cortisol. Cortisol is what we consider a energy mobilization hormone. Okay, it's going to start to mobilize energy into the bloodstream, get your body ready. This is one of the main reasons why, during your workout, it's mobilizing blood glucose into the bloodstream. It's making sure that your body is keeping you in almost like this fight or flight, right? So your body doesn't want your blood sugar to drop too low. It's going to start to, that's obviously going to have its own problems. So, fatigue, like lethargy, your body needs to stay alert. So cortisol is one of those hormones. There's a few others, but that one is, one of the more prevalent ones here, especially when we're talking about stress. And what this is going to actually do is it literally triggers your brain to signal hunger. And oftentimes it's going to look for quick energy. And one of those quickest energy sources is hyperpalatable sugary foods. Now, where cortisol plays a big role into this is that it's going to directly actually influence further cravings. So this could not only just look like you're skipping meals, like there's different types of stressors, right? And they're all going to play a role into this. You have the physiological stressor of your body isn't getting, stable, blood sugar throughout the day, right? You're not getting regular, meals throughout the day. Maybe even your meals themselves, which I'm going to talk about that, aren't balanced enough to actually even, properly and adequately support blood sugar regulation or just adequate energy coming into your body throughout the day. A lot of women who are dieting are usually trying to cut carbs and they're trying to keep really small portions or maybe just skip meals in general, like intermittent fasting. And that is directly working against you in this position when we're talking about how that shows up later in the day. But if we're talking about the stress response in general, there's going to be that physiological side, and there's also going to be the mental side. If you have a really stressful job or you just have a really stressful day, and now that right there is going to play another big role on how your body is going to actually reflect that. That alone can lead to more stress responses in the body, more adrenal output, more cortisol output. Now we have your body kind of, signaling this low grade fight or flight that you're in. Pair that with not properly being fed throughout the day. Your body is like this kind of overstimulated state that it's just staying in. And what that can typically look like is again, cortisol, your main stress hormone. I know it's a big buzzy word, but it is a very important hormone in your body. It's not something that is a bad thing. We need cortisol in our bodies. Without it, we wouldn't have much of a circadian rhythm. It is your fight or flight. It also plays a role in exercise. Like there's a lot of benefits to cortisol. The issue is when it becomes dysregulated. So what's going to happen here, and the reason why cravings aren't just a willpower issue, is when there's stressors in play, physiological and also mental. Cortisol, as it rises, it's going to specifically bind to certain receptors in the brain that regulate hunger. That's going to stimulate appetite, stimulate cravings. Okay, this stress is also going to typically to raising blood sugar. Okay, that's going to require your body to obviously fall into a state where it's providing quick energy, right? Your body has stores of glucose in your cells. It's considered glycogen. Your body can also synthesize glucose or blood sugar from other substrates in the body. But this is going to directly also drive cravings, because now your body, if it's mobilizing energy, it needs to re-up that energy. This is going to also disrupt insulin sensitivity. Insulin sensitivity alone can cause blood sugar swings, drives cravings. You are going to have this start to interfere with certain satiety hormones like leptin and ghrelin. Okay, ghrelin causes you to be hungry. Leptin is a hormone that signals that, like, hey, you're satiated, you're satisfied. If we're messing with these hormones, that's going to reduce fullness, increase appetite even further. Then we have your brain activating more reward pathways, getting dopamine from this. So hyperpalatable foods are going to drive, this like appeal during times under stress. So you can kind of see how this is starting to paint that picture of this isn't just a willpower issue. You're quite literally fighting biology at this point. But what we can also see to kind of pair into this picture is you actually have endogenous circadian rhythm fluctuations throughout the day. And one of those is that it actually drives ghrelin, your hunger hormone, that's the exact hormone that stimulates you to feel hungry. It actually drives it 10 to 15% higher in the evening. So you literally have already a natural increase in hunger in the evening. So now pair that with not fueling properly during the day or under fueling through the day. Pair that with extra stress being thrown on top of it, either a stressful day or a stressful job, and a natural hormonal increase to make you hungrier. Now this is like what I consider the perfect storm for raiding your fridge and your pantry. Okay, and this is where, like I said earlier, this comes into a much deeper picture of you're fighting biology right now. You are fighting your body's instinct for survival. This isn't just you just lack willpower. There's so much more going on here. Now, there's another very prevalent loop that we can see with this, and it's obviously how this starts to influence guilt and shame. And I think the funniest thing, and where the irony really plays in, is that this concept in in dieting and just diet culture in general has led a lot of us to believe that, the cycle that diet culture claims to solve actually just refuels the problem to begin with. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times we think that, okay, cool, restriction means we're being good, right? We're trying to lose weight, you're restricting your calories, restricting your food intake, right? So you restrict, and it makes you feel like you're doing something right. Then your body starts to experience what is known as perceived scarcity, right? Think back to like primal instincts. If we don't get enough food coming in, your body is going to start to feel like, I need to find food, okay? So your body doesn't know the difference between you're in a cave and, there hasn't been a woolly mammoth that's passed by in a while, and you have a fridge full of food that you're just not giving it, okay? It just knows what it's perceiving. And perceived scarcity is that your body is not getting enough energy to regulate itself. that is going to lead to a biological drive to compensate. Okay, so now your body has to find ways to compensate for that energy. Craving hits. Now you eat past intention. The guilt comes on with that. And then you lead down a path of, oh, I just need to restrict harder tomorrow. But the restriction was exactly the starting point. So your finish line is now your starting point. And then it happens all over again. So this is where we also can see certain concepts where, your eyes are bigger than your stomach, right? And if you've, gone out to eat, you've probably seen this before where like a lot of times, I've had a lot of clients like, oh, like, I just like, if they came to me from a check-in and they didn't do well when they went out to eat one night, we always trace this back to, well, what did you do earlier in the day? And one of the most common things they say is, oh, well, I skipped lunch, or, oh, I had smaller portions throughout the day. And there's a caveat to this. I do like a certain strategy where we can maybe budget calories, so to speak, if we are calorie or macro tracking, to help to make sure like, hey, if you go out to eat, you can be able to like maybe have a little bit more wiggle room to enjoy yourself. That's 100% a viable strategy when implemented structurally and intentionally. But we don't want to sacrifice food volume for calories. That's where people usually mess up with. They'll just eat like, a chicken breast and green beans and call it a day. Like that's not how we want to go about it. There's a much better way to navigate that, to be able to budget your calories, so to speak, so you can enjoy yourself later. But again, this is a strategy I don't use with everyone. This is a strategy that, is something that I'm very careful with in practice, because for some people that can still lead to like this concept in their brain of like, oh, I have extra calories, so I'll just eat more when I go out to eat. That's kind of just coming in the back door and like causing a ruckus anyways. So that is a possible concept. But again, if you starve yourself all day practically, and then you go out to eat and you have all this food in front of you, that's the equivalent of, again, take us back to like primal days, like that's the equivalent of like you've been in a cave starving for the past 4 days, and all of a sudden a woolly mammoth's in front of you, and you're trying to like tell yourself like, I don't need to go eat it. I don't need to go eat it. Like, I don't need food, when your body's literally signaling like, I need food. So like you trying to resist a biological urge for your body to compensate and get fed, you're fighting a always losing battle at that point. Now, again, is there a way to 100% push past this? Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, bodybuilders do it. You see bodybuilders that are starving themselves for these competitions, and they do have that level of discernment where they can literally just say, I don't need this, right? I think that's an insane skill. I also think it's honestly one of the biggest reasons I also ended up having an eating disorder, so there's a fine line there, right? But at the end of the day, the binging isn't the problem, okay? I think a lot of times we point our finger at the binge. The restriction is the problem, because binging is the response to severe restriction. Okay, now again, in order to lose weight, we need we need some sort of caloric restriction. 100%. That's a part of, dieting. But there's a really big difference between like you have a mild calorie deficit that helps you to lose about like, give or take a half a pound to a pound per week, and you can maintain that longer and it's sustainable, versus your crash dieting, eating super low calorie, cutting out all your carbs, and you're starving your body, and you're working out on top of it. So your body is like severely depleted, under recovered, and it needs to re-up. And, the equivalent is you driving down the parkway, your gas tank is on empty, and you're trying to put your foot to the floor in a car that doesn't have any more gas, and you're trying to expect the car to keep going. Like, just doesn't really work that way, and this cycle is not only rooted in it's not just psychological. Okay, hopefully you're starting to kind of see this is a biological response by your body. Okay, this is literally your body like fighting to survive the environment that it's been placed in. Now, some paths that we can typically take here. Okay, this is a framework. I'm going to walk you through it. This is one that I typically use with clients. This is one that I've used for myself that has helped me a lot. And it's one that I actually put into an exact step-by-step guide that is actually linked in the resources below that you can grab. It's free. But this is like the practical takeaway of like kind of like a little bit of a breakdown of some steps from that exact guide that I've used before. Now, the most important thing before we even go into any of these paths that could be possibly taken right now is the one question of you sitting down before you, like when you have to acknowledge the craving first. Awareness is everything. If you don't have awareness, it's all out the window. But you need to pause. Okay, when you acknowledge that, hey, you're about to do something, you're about to go grab for something, pause for 60 seconds, take a deep breath, and literally just ask yourself, what is this actually? Because it's going to be one of three things right now. Okay, path one is you are actually hungry. This is likely you're going to feel this, like your stomach's maybe gurgling, maybe even is like cramping a little bit. You genuinely are like, crap, I'm hungry. Okay, likely means you underfueled earlier in the day. So, there's a saying that I actually have heard before that I like, and I've actually used this myself, is if you aren't willing to have an apple in that moment, you're not actually hungry. You're having a craving. And that honestly stuck with me because like I literally use it sometimes and I'm like, okay, like if I had an apple in my hand, would I be satisfied eating it? Apples are filling. And to be honest, I don't know many people that are like, oh, I'm going to eat 2 apples. Like, I feel pretty full after an apple. So, if you're genuinely hungry, we need something that's going to actually satiate you. So there's signs to look for, like, feelings, like, again, stomach cramping, like genuinely feeling like your stomach is like empty. Like maybe, again, you're hearing like gurgling or something. And if that is the case, we need to have more of a structured snack. Okay, something that's actually going to satiate you, not given to just sugary cravings. Okay, so what that could look like is maybe Greek yogurt and berries, or an apple and peanut butter. You could do cottage cheese with some nuts, or maybe like, if you have turkey or something like that, you can do like turkey and crackers or anything along those lines, or turkey roll-ups. Then the trick here is move immediately into a wind down routine. My favorite way to do this is actually to jump right into brushing my teeth. I don't know anybody who wants to brush their teeth more than once at night. Like, not that I hate brushing my teeth, but like it's just tedious. I'm like, I don't want to do this again. So for me, it also, it's like the mintiness in your mouth. Like, it kind of reminds me of like if I brush my teeth and I drink orange juice, it's like, oh, it's like, I don't want to have to brush my teeth again, and also like now my mouth's all minty. Like I'm not really in the mood for food at that point. So that's a really good trick that I've used before. But moving right into your wind down routine is really important, okay? Because then it's gonna, again, you're keeping yourself occupied. Don't just sit in the kitchen. That's the worst thing you could possibly do, is stay around the food, okay? So the key message here is that feeding real hunger is healthy. Okay, I'll be really clear on that. You're correcting an earlier gap, and that's okay. And then at this point, you want to look, okay, where did you underfeed yourself earlier in the day? Path 2, this is one that's very, very common, is you're stressed and you're emotionally depleted. Okay, like we talked about, these cravings can be rooted in stress responses, cortisol responses, and just an emotional load that's taking over. Okay, and food is not going to fix it. So what we need at this point is we need a little bit of a downshift. That could look like something as simple as a little check-in with yourself. Like maybe you sit on the couch or you lay on the couch, or if it's nice out, hey, go for a short little walk, take some deep breaths, and you can even, I like to write things down, but you can do this in your head if you like. I think writing things down is way more powerful because it gets it out and like you can read it back to yourself. But a simple question of like, what do I need right now? Right? Because if it's not really hunger and you're just looking for a quick little dopamine hit or a fix, right? Something that you think is going to actually help you, what we have to realize is that you're just opening up the door later for a bigger problem, because then afterwards you're going to lead to feeling regretful. So then you're trying to regulate your nervous system and your stress with something that's going to cause you more stress in the back end. So it's like, hey, here's a few minutes of what you think is relief, but then here's the rest of the night and all day tomorrow where you feel like crap because of that one decision. So it's kind of reversed to what we actually think, but like in the moment we're not thinking of that. So now, after you do this little downshift, whatever it might look like, maybe that even is like, hey, you just got home from work, like before you eat anything, go shower. Like, do something relaxing and ask yourself that question of like, what do I really need right now for myself, right? But after that, what you're typically going to find is that either the craving kind of dissolves and you like maybe feel calmer, or it just becomes easier to manage it intentionally. Okay, it doesn't mean it always goes away, but it can become easier. And the key message out of this is really that the craving was never about the food. You were actually craving peace. You were craving something to calm you down, something to regulate, something to feel like you're safe, right? Especially if you had a really, really stressful day. Okay, so that's a really, really important one. The third one is you just want a treat, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with wanting a treat. I have a sweet tooth. I want my treats sometimes, but there's a really big difference between having it intentionally and then having it and spiraling because you lost control. Okay, so the idea here is to plate it, portion it, whatever it might be, sit down, enjoy it. Then, again, wind down routine. Go into brushing immediately. Okay, the key idea here is that the treat isn't the problem. The guilt is because of how much you're usually having of it, right? Like, think about it. You know, I mean, unless like this runs really deep, but like no one's just like sitting having an Oreo and they're like, oh, I messed my whole day up. I had one Oreo, right? Like usually you're having a few. You know, if you start, you usually can't stop, and it's that feeling that you couldn't stop and you kept going that usually leads to that guilt, because you can remember a point where you're like, oh, I should stop after this, right? Like, but you didn't listen to that cue and you kept going, and then that's where the guilt comes from. If you had stopped at that cue, you probably would have felt a lot better, you know. And this is something I learned over the years, was that, you know, it wasn't the problem was never the treat. The problem was always the fact that I went past the point where I knew, like, if I keep doing this, I'm not going to feel good, right? Like if I had stopped when I knew, I felt fine. And that's what I learned to do gradually over time, is I learned to actually be able to do that. But having structure is what's actually going to build self-control. Restriction destroys self-control, but we're taught to look at it differently. We think like, oh, well, if I restrict myself, if I just cut out sugar from my diet, if I just cut out all these things from my diet, if I just don't go out to eat, then maybe I'll actually be able to manage this better. But that's literally the complete opposite. That's the complete opposite. Okay. Now, there are some levers here that I think, you know, in practice we can kind of actually use as some takeaways here that you can literally start to do tomorrow to actually start to regulate your appetite, regulate your cravings a lot better. And this is, again, directly out of that step-by-step guide. Now, the first one is going to be having regular high protein meals throughout the day, at least 3. Like breakfast, lunch, dinner should be high protein meals. Okay, this is going to stabilize your blood sugar. It also helps with suppressing ghrelin. So protein is one of the most highest satiety macros and foods that you can eat. So more protein can help a lot with regulating your appetite a lot better. Secondly, is going to have a real lunch. Don't sit down and pick. Don't have a snack. We need a real structured lunch. A good solid portion of protein, healthy carb, maybe even a 5% carb would be beneficial. You know, fruits, vegetables can be playing into that too. But like we're typically like, you know, I would say like having it like maybe that might look like, hey, chicken, potato, and maybe like a side of green beans, or you can even have like a side of berries or something like that. And then obviously we want to look at like, well, where's the fat source coming into this meal, right? It can be either maybe avocado or something like that. You know, again, like think of like how to balance that plate, okay? That's what's actually going to lead to you feeling satiated and also giving you the nutrients and energy your body needs, especially at like a halfway point in the day. Having a planned afternoon snack is also going to be really important here. You know, not everybody needs this, but if you have a really big window between lunch and dinner, again, think like, you know, eyes bigger than your stomach. If you don't eat and then you get starving and then you sit down for dinner, you're going to likely overconsume at dinner because like you didn't have a little touch point with yourself beforehand. So that's a helpful strategy, is to make sure you do have a little snack before you actually go and sit down and have your dinner. It could look like, you know, if you had lunch at 3, don't wait until 6 p.m. until you have dinner. Again, like 6-hour window is like you're going to be starving. So maybe around like 3 o'clock, have a little snack, right? That could look like a number of things, like some things I listed before, like Greek yogurt and berries, or, you know, it could even be like a protein shake and like some fruit, or, you know, an apple and peanut butter, anything that's just like, hey, this is a touch point, this is a stop, little check-in with yourself. Make sure that you have something in your system, so that way you're holding yourself over until dinner. Also, a very helpful strategy if you go out to eat as well is to have a little something before you go, so you don't sit down, look at the menu, and like, again, eyes bigger than your stomach. And then lastly is going to be managing your stress load. I think that's honestly probably one of the biggest ones. You know, a depleted, overstimulated body, you know, and nervous system is going to override any plan that you try and give it. Okay, again, we're fighting biology here. So I think finding ways to help regulate your nervous system, breath work, you know, progressive muscle relaxation is a good one. You know, going for little walks, take a hot shower, you know, things that are going to help to calm you, right? Like check in with yourself, let yourself know that everything is okay. Okay, and this is where it comes down to like self-control is perceived as this idea that like you can sit with a donut in front of you and like just be able to say like no, no, no. And like, yes, that's a part of it. Okay, that is a skill and that can be learned. But that doesn't come before the self-control that keeps you structured throughout the day. Okay, and I forget where I heard this, but one of the greatest depictions of self-control that I ever heard, and I literally do this, you know, I don't consider myself a super high self-control person. Like I have my moments, but where I think a lot of people who do get perceived as having good self-control thrive is because they set their environment up to have to use it less. Like I don't keep a lot of sweet treats and stuff in the house. I don't really food shop for it. You know, I'll keep maybe 1 or 2 little things if I want to just have a little nibble here and there. But like typically I will keep it out of the house because then I'm not as tempted to have it. I'm not triggered to have it, right? So, that could also look like not putting yourself in environments where you're tempted to go and do it. If you're trying to stop drinking as much, well, maybe stop going out to bars or hang out with people at bars. Maybe suggest going somewhere else. Like the more you can set your environment up so you don't have to use self-control is really how you learn how to properly use self-control. Like, because you're using self-control to actually manage your situation and your environment, not this you in the middle of that moment trying to manage your behavior. Okay. But again, if you're not fueling throughout the day first and having those touch points first, you trying to implement that, again, you're fighting an always losing battle. Now, again, as far as an immediate action step, this is all listed out in that exact step-by-step guide that I have linked in the description for you that has the full night craving rescue plan along with a actual 7-day framework built around this exact approach. It's free. It's practical. It's linked in the description. Just go ahead and grab that below. Now, this episode helped you to actually understand a little bit more about why night cravings happen and also what you can actually do about them. Subscribe on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And please share this episode on your social media to help more women find the show. It is also helpful if you leave a quick rating and a short review with your biggest takeaway. As always, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram and let me know what topic you want me to break down next. Resources and next steps are in the description below. You are built for better, and I will see you on the next one.